familiar faces out there.
Yeah.
Great, great.
Good crowd.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. We really appreciate it. I'm Jessica Rodeck. I'm with Accenture. For the past several years, I've been working with large organizations on optimization, forecasting, governance, and investment planning. And I've noticed something interesting. FinOps teams are extremely great at telling you where money was spent, but they're not always invited to the conversation where decisions are made on how money is spent.
Hello, everyone. Aryeh, also from Accenture. And I've noticed something very, very similar. We see our clients achieve great degrees of tactical success when it comes to FinOps, but they have difficulty converting that into strategic influence. And that's really what we're going to focus on today. How do we up-level FinOps practices to help make them strategic business enablers?
So I want to start today with a little story. Almost a year ago, I was supporting an organization, and we were heading into their annual financial planning cycle. So the meeting invites were starting to go out, meetings with the CIO, the CFO, the product leadership team. And the agenda was straightforward, right? Where were investments going to be made? What did we need to prioritize? How were those first wave of initiatives going to be funded? And at that point, the FinOps team, we hadn't been invited to any of the meetings. And it wasn't because we weren't good at our job. It wasn't because leadership didn't value the work that we did. It was because we were still seen as the team that explained variances, not the team that influenced decisions. So about probably a week or so before the first round of meetings was to kick off, we identified what was kind of a large problem. We saw that technology costs were increasing, but the value that was being derived from those technology investments was lagging far behind. So first glance, right, it looks like a cost problem. But as the FinOps team, as we started digging in and uncovering, what we determined really was that it was a capital allocation problem. So here leadership was asking not why are my costs increasing, but they were asking, am I investing in the right thing? Am I achieving value? What do I do next? And so instead of bringing another dashboard, our FinOps team dug in, and we focused on three things. First was unit economics. We were able to answer the question of what it cost per customer, per transaction, and per key business capability. Next, we brought in trade-off decisions or recommendations for investments. So if you went with option A, this is what the outcome would be. If you went with option B, this would be the outcome. And what are the implications of those decisions across the organization? And then last, we finally brought in a recommendation, a portfolio-level recommendation. And so we weren't looking at how do we reduce cost. We weren't looking at how do I stop spending. We were looking at how do we redirect or reallocate funding, and where do we go from here? And so this is when the conversation changed. And in that moment, our FinOps team became strategic. The conversation changed from costs to what are my priorities within the organization? And I realized something. We were the only team within the organization that was able to connect the technology spend, the consumption, and the value that the organization was achieving. And so what I was able to realize, or my aha moment, was that we didn't earn a seat in those decision planning meetings because we were saving cost. We earned that seat because we elevated our team to be strategic. We were helping leadership make decisions. So what we want to explore today is FinOps isn't strategic when it saves money. but it becomes strategic when it influences where money is spent. And so it's not, the capability isn't a barrier. It's really the perception and the positioning of the FinOps team within the organization.
Okay, so what are we going to cover today? Just to give you a bit of our roadmap. First, we're going to talk about why AI is creating this really distinct moment of opportunity for FinOps practices, and we see it across all the organizations we work with. We're going to walk through some of the common pitfalls that we see when we're working with clients, things that they're doing that don't provide the clarity that executives are looking for, and how to reframe that to show what executives actually need. From there, we're going to talk through 5 capabilities that you can bring home that should influence the way you deliver FinOps at your organization. We'll walk through a real-world case study, fictional app, real scenario from a real engagement. And we're going to show how we elevate FinOps to that strategic plane. And then finally, we're going to leave you with a few things that you can take home when you get back to the office on Monday that'll help you chart a similar path towards strategic enablement. So we've heard about this at length this morning in the keynote, right? FinOps really has, I think, this golden ticket moment, this really unique moment of opportunity. Every executive at every company around the world is desperate to understand and quantify the value that AI is bringing. Costs are exploding, adoption rates are getting faster every day. We've seen this even within Accenture, where for the first time in my 11-year career at Accenture, I was looped in on an email thread with the CEO of the company. That was huge for me. And the reason for that is because it was an AI-focused cost trend. Right? We've never had that level of visibility as our internal FinOps practice before. We don't typically see that level of visibility when we deal with clients. But suddenly, everyone has executive attention. It's eating up all the oxygen in this room. It ate up all the oxygen in this very room during the keynote. So what we want to do is we want to start that strategic journey with AI. We're going to use AI as our foot in the door. But what we do is not AI only. We see AI governance. It's a governance problem. It's not necessarily an AI technology problem, right? What AI will do, it will accentuate gaps in your existing governance. It doesn't necessarily create entirely new problems. It just makes existing problems more difficult. And the good news is, right, the momentum is with you. This entire industry is pivoting towards AI. So let's embrace this moment. Let's use and redeem that golden ticket, cash it in to get us the exposure that will get us in rooms with executives. Now let's talk about some common failure modes. So if you've committed one of these sins, raise a hand, right? You've created a dashboard that you are the only person that ever looked at. You got into a meeting, and you explained things beautifully in technical terms, and you thought you were the smartest, most technical person ever. And everyone that was listening to you had no idea what you were talking about. Some people I see, OK. These are common pitfalls that we see people fall into, right? There's dashboard overload. They're reporting things that are descriptive, not necessarily insightful. They're framing things as they happened, not shaping what will happen. We see this over and over again, right? People are being reactive. They're invited last. They're not in the meeting where things are being decided. They're reacting to decisions that have been made without them. And we often see that people are falling into sort of a monthly cadence trap. This is the cycle. This is when we generally report. That cycle is not necessarily informed of the accelerating reality of an AI-driven world, right? So our reaction cycles need to happen a lot faster. Now, the barriers to fixing these is not really capability. Yes, we'll need more tooling. Yes, we'll need to move faster. It's really how we position FinOps and frame the problems that we're trying to solve. We're not trying to frame reactive problems. We're trying to solve the forward-looking, future-looking problems. So what keeps you in the room, Jessica?
That's right. So kind of what's the flip side of where the FinOps within your organization is kind of stalling out? So first, there's a set of questions that we need to think about and be able to provide the responses for. So first, where should we invest? The FinOps team needs to position itself as the team that helps provide insights on how to reinvest savings, not just reduce spend. We need to look for ways to fund growth without increasing budgets. Next, profitability. So top of mind for any executive is the technology and our spend creating value? So think about unit economics. What's the cost per transaction? What is the margin? What's the impact to that margin by introducing a new feature? Efficiency, right? We're good at that. We need to think about scaling efficiently. So think about revenue growth and spend growth. Once again, what's the impact to margin? Investment visibility. So what's driving spend, right? We still need to think about cloud, about SaaS, and now about AI economics, about tokenomics. We're still going to have the challenge of shared platform allocation. Decision clarity. So your role now is to provide clarity to executives and the leadership team. You need to be prepared to recommend investment trade-offs. So what are the implications if they continue to fund something? What if they redirect that funding elsewhere? What does that look like throughout the organization? You need to be able to prioritize scenarios and provide the understanding of why you're recommending those scenarios in that order.
Absolutely.
And lastly, recommend actions, right? They're looking to you on where do I go next? What's my next step? Risk and governance, right? This is a core piece of FinOps. We still need to be able to provide that control. We're still going to be looked at for forecasting accuracy, helping to provide consumption guardrails, and then also making sure that we're not overly exposed when it comes to vendor commitments. So now your role as FinOps practitioners within your organization is to help shape the decision.
Okay, so AI, I know it feels very new, and it is. It's harder, it's faster, it's more complex. I think of it as less forgiving, right? It's easier to get wrong. The reaction cycles, as we mentioned, are much, much shorter. The tooling required to manage it is more complex, and it introduces some genuinely new problems. But we don't see it, and maybe this is just Jessica in my opinion, and maybe not the official opinion of Accenture, I don't see it as fundamentally new. And the reason I say that is the same questions that we were always answering with FinOps are still the key questions that we need to answer, right? Where's the money going? Who's spending what? How do we control it? How do we add governance without slowing innovation? And most importantly, right, and we heard this around the keynote this morning, what are we getting in exchange for it, right? We're spending all this money, what do we get in return? What are the benefits that are coming to the company? So it's familiar problems, right? All of these questions are questions that we've been positioned to answer as FinOps teams. The stakes are significantly higher now with AI. But these are problems that we have experience solving, right? You could frame AI as volatile, unpredictable. Really what it is another dimension of pay-per-use spend, dynamic spend that needs dynamic governance. You can say that it's cost that's difficult to allocate. We've solved shared allocation problems in the past and redistributed costs. Yes, the scale is greater. Problems aren't fundamentally new. I think of it as going from maybe economics 101 to economics 401 or 501. We're not going from economics to biology.
So as we're in this new age of AI, I get asked the question a lot, is AI going to replace FinOps? No. I don't think that AI is going to replace FinOps. AI will replace the tactical elements of FinOps, and it will cause the strategic part to become even more valuable.
Absolutely.
So if we look at the FinOps practitioner role before, right, our key responsibilities, reporting, understanding variances, being able to explain that, finding right sizing and waste reduction and optimizations, all those activities were highly structured. And that's something that AI is able to automate and does a pretty good job at it. So instead of fighting AI, we need to let AI automate and accelerate those activities, while we as FinOps practitioners are focused and become strategic advisors. So we need to think about that real-time governance, the unit economics, those portfolio level decisions. All these activities, they require context, they require stakeholder alignment, and really and what maybe is most important is they require accountability. So AI will automate those tactical pieces of our role, and we need to reposition ourselves to be strategic and answering the strategic questions within the organization. Okay, so if we think about FinOps as a ladder, and these are each of the different rungs, and the bottom rung, reporter, right? So this is where the FinOps team was responsible within the organization for providing kind of that historical view. And this is where most FinOps teams started, right? Providing what was spent, who consumed it, why did we have a variance? From there, FinOps evolved. We became the optimizers. So then we were included in conversations across teams, helping identify optimization recommendations, drive down waste, drive savings. But where do we need to go next? Next, influencer. So we need to be the ones that are sitting front and center at the executive table and telling them where they should make investments, their trade-offs, what the final recommendation is. And the last rung of the ladder is investor. So this isn't the person responsible for the budget, but this is the person that influences where the budget is going to be spent. So take a minute, find yourself on the ladder, and find where the next rung is for you to go. So the next question, right, is how do I move up the ladder? So in our experience, we see 5 capabilities that are going to earn you that seat at the executive table. First off, and this was brought up in the keynotes speech this morning, several of the presenters brought it up, but speak the language of the business. Have empathy for the business. Be able to translate the technical aspects into a dialogue that makes sense to the business. Build your unit economics. You now need to be the team that is driving that unit economics. Have the answers to the cost per customer, cost per transaction. You need to be able to enable pricing decisions. You're now responsible for bringing those trade-off scenarios. Don't bring dashboards, bring choices, bring options. Understand how each one of those options will have an impact. Now, we also need to change the way that we operate. We need to operate at the speed of the business. So many of us are stuck in those monthly governance cadences, or maybe it's a weekly or bi-weekly optimization sprint. We need to operate now at the daily, at the weekly signals that we're seeing. And then lastly, you're now responsible for owning the narrative. Tell the story, don't just bring data, right? Bring the story that that data is telling you. And with these 5 capabilities, you'll then be able to elevate your FinOps team within your organization and move them up the ladder.
All right. So speaking of stories, let's tell you a story. Now, this is a real-world case study, right, that comes from a real Accenture engagement. We've changed the name. It's a fictional name. The numbers are proportionally accurate. The architecture of the application is exact. And the scenario that we're going to walk through and how we approached it, how we solved it, is all real. So there's an application called Atlas. It's a RAG-based, right, RAG architecture, AI assistant, co-pilot tool built on AWS by a mid-market HR platform. And this app, when we were brought in, stands at a bit of an inflection point. It had been released across an initial base of users, some paid, some free. And it was leadership's baby, the executive's main bet for the year. They were looking to scale it out across a 3x user base and make it part of the platform, right? Included in all deployments across customers. Like I said, they were going to increase the user base by 3x. We were brought in to evaluate, does this make sense, right? Is this app financially healthy? Are we making a good move? Are we making a bad move? Accenture, we don't know. In order to answer this question, we're going to walk through a 4-step strategic arc, right, of going from not knowing much to diagnosing the problem, identifying the unit economics in proper business terms, terms that are relevant to pricing decisions, terms that are relevant to the true unit economics, right, things that have business meaning. We're going to stabilize the application not through reactive, knee-jerk optimization actions, through a capital allocation lens focused on design decisions. Once we've done that, we'll prove that the unit economics hold, and if they do, we'll come back to that executive committee with an influence recommendation, investment recommendations on what to do next, shaping where the next dollar goes. So to start, we come in, we need to figure out, are the unit economics healthy? On one side of the slide, you can see the dashboard that was being shown. And this is actually one of maybe 15 different dashboards that were shown. It's accurate, it's detailed, it shows cost by service to a decimal precision, month over month variations, variability. Accurate, detailed, decision empty. Does not put anything in a business language that executives can understand, that drives a decision, that exposes the unit economics of this application. Flipping it, though, and reframing in a tiered cost per user view very, very, very quickly exposes the problem. We look at it, it's not just that the free users are losing us money. We're actually losing $16 per paid user. The entire application is bleeding $134,000 per month. The unit economics are totally underwater. If we scale now, we're going to be increasing the bleed. They didn't know that before we did that slight reframe, and suddenly, when you reposition in unit economics terms, everything comes into clarity and we understand what we need to do next, right? Next, we need to stabilize. How do we go about doing that? Right, like I said earlier, we're not doing knee-jerk optimization actions. Accenture's approach is to apply a capital allocation lens, compounding decision gates that will help drive the design and embed cost efficiency into the application. So what do I mean by that? We're asking questions like, does this thing need to run at all? How much work does the application need to accomplish? That'll help shape demand. How smart does it need to be? What level of intelligence do we need to purchase in order to accomplish the task that this application is meant to accomplish? How much work does each individual request need to do? How efficient is the platform overall? How efficiently do we scale? How efficient is our token factory, to use the term that was used today? And finally, now that we've walked through those usage optimization levers, how efficiently do we source? How efficiently do we lock in on price? So just to touch on a few of the actions we took here, you can probably see the most impactful was deflecting known responses, right? Upon analyzing this, we saw a lot of the requests are things that could be served up from a pre-written FAQ or from how-to links. The cheapest LLM call is the call that doesn't run. We can still answer user questions correctly, accurately, meaningfully, without invoking the LLM. That saved us about $13 per paid user per month. That was by far the biggest optimization lever. Next, we implemented model routing. Some requests genuinely needed to run on Sonnet, but most didn't. 60% of the overall requests of the application could be routed to Haiku. Simple questions, simple answers. We capped context budgets and implemented prompt budgets to limit the amount of work that's done per request. And this next one is key. We weren't just focused on Bedrock, right? It's an entire AI application. That doesn't mean it's AI only. We saw an excellent iceberg slide today, right? There are many layers below the surface. Other services that contribute to the cost per paid user, the cost to serve for this application. If we over-rotate on just the AI service, we could miss the majority of cost. And actually what we found, Jessica, in a lot of our customers' AI applications, more than 50% of the cost is not in Bedrock. It's in those other services. Here, we're managing the vector database embeddings, again, reducing the cost to serve. And finally, now that like I said, we've been through all that usage side optimization, we're committing to a Bedrock provision throughput purchase for about 2/3 of the remaining capacity and locking in at a lower rate. Three key things just to mention here. First and foremost, right, each of these recommendations is presented as a trade-off, right? There's a balance between quality on the one hand, cost on the other hand. Like I said, if we just went and axed everything and directed everything to Haiku, we would have lost value in the application. The business teams that we were working with that run this and own this application would not have been happy. As Mike said in his keynote, right, we need to have empathy for the business teams. So each of these layers that we went through, each of these optimization levers that we embedded in the application was the result of vigorous debate, discussion, collaboration with our product counterparts. That's how we set the line of, right, quality on the one hand, cost efficiency on the other. Second thing, you'll notice all of these, like I've been saying, are not knee-jerk actions. They're embedded and built into the design of the application, meaning they're sustainable, meaning they'll stay in place as the application continues to scale. And finally, right, and this is, I think, probably the most important, all of them are in unit economics terms. We're not showing savings as some out-of-context dollar value for a technical service. They're all in terms that mean something to the business so they can evaluate the trade-off and make the decision. So we've been through this process. Atlas is now profitable. We go from a $58 cost to serve to $32. We now have a positive margin. This application's ROI positive. What happens next? Well, now we need to prove that ROI positivity is sustainable, right? We're going to add users. We need to make sure that it stays profitable as we scale. If not, our problem is going to be worse. So we've been through the diagnose phase. We found the $58 cost to serve. We lowered it to $32 in that stabilized phase. For the 3 months of approve phase, we want to make sure it holds. And it's holding, we observe, between the $32 and $34 range. That's acceptable, right? We have positive margin per paid user as we add 30% to our user base. And how did it hold? Right? It's not magic. It held because we were actively managing it, right? We were actively observing it. Every day, we were showing cost in those cost to serve in that framework. Every day, we were checking to make sure that there were no spikes. We implemented alerting and governance controls. The embedded optimization actions held, right? The model router continued to route to the right place. Prompt budgets continued to hold things at a cap. We made ongoing provision throughput recommendations as user bases increased to make sure, again, we were maintaining that cost to serve. Essentially, what this means is now executives can scale with confidence. They can be confident that further scaling isn't going to dramatically alter the economic profile of this application. And that brings us to the final meeting, right? This is when we earn our seat at the table. We're now in the room with executives, and we can make our investment recommendations. And these are the 4 recommendations that we made. So first, no surprise, we clear the Atlas app to scale, right? We show unit economics have been proven, they've been corrected, they hold. Let's roll out to the remaining 3x users. And when we do that, we can be confident that this will be the cost to serve, this is the cost to achieve, and this is the amount of benefit that you'll get. We also, while we were analyzing users, noticed that not all users are the same, right? There are some that are spending, yes, the exact average $32 cost to serve. There are some that are dramatically more, some that are dramatically less. In collaboration with the product team, we've identified that there's a small group of ultra users that probably would benefit from a dedicated, higher capacity, higher intelligence product tier. We recommended launching an enterprise grade tier at a premium price for premium usage. And that would bring another approximately $500,000 per year in benefit. We took the model routing controller that we had built for them, estimated what it would cost to industrialize it, and embedded in 3 other generative AI workloads that the organization was running, taking the success from Atlas from our stabilized phase and rolling it out across a wider base. And for, I think it was 200K of engineering effort, we could achieve 450K in recurring benefits. And finally, and this is where we start directing investment decisions and saying, fund this, don't fund this. We didn't just do this for Atlas. Atlas is the shining example of where it worked. There were other applications in the portfolio where it didn't work. We defund the negative ROI application so that we can fund all of these initiatives on the ROI-positive applications. Overall, look what we've done. We've added $2.1 million per year in net new value, increasing margins. We've helped redirect fund a winner, axe a loser. We've helped launch a new product, and we've helped drive efficiencies across an entire application base. All of these are strategic objectives, and all resonate with the Executive Council. And perhaps most importantly of all, right, and really the proof that we earned our seat in the room, this cost to serve gate, this 4-step strategic arc that we just walked through, becomes the financial governance that's required of all AI workloads going forward. So we haven't just earned our seat, we've cemented it. We now control the process, or we now own the process by which these things are measured. So again, what does good look like? We went from negative paid margin. Well, actually, I should back up a step. We went from not knowing what our paid margin was to identifying it as negative, helping correct it as positive, proving that it holds, and showing executives on what to do next. And each of those what to do next investments were presented as bets with the data that executives need. We were then able to, right, in that conversation, show 3 different executives who care about 3 different things, 3 different views of that same information. Right? The CIO cares, can I govern this? And we say, yes, sir, you can. We have proof for that, right? We've shown in the proof phase that unit economics hold. Here's all the governance features we've embedded into this application and into other applications as well. The CTO cares, how technically efficient are we? Are we engineering for unit economics? Are we engineering for cost efficiency? And we can say, yes, ma'am, we actually have. We've built a model router that we've industrialized and productized and released across a wider application base. And finally, the CFO, he cares about the dollars and cents, right? He wants to know, what am I getting for my money? Is this affecting my bottom line? Is this sweetening my bottom line? And we can say, yep, we've added $2.1 million in net new value. We've increased margins. We've lowered cost to serve. We've made you more profitable. Each of these executives cares about a different thing. The same analysis, shaped in a slightly different way, answers all 3 of their questions. And this is the decision clarity that executives are yearning for, that the first person who can give it to them will become indispensable going forward. So same executive lens, same insight, same conversation. The conversation is slightly tuned to the audience. We're speaking the language of business, and we're framing the narrative based on what the people care about. And let's go forward. So if you remember nothing else, Jessica, what should we focus on?
So as we wrap up today, if you remember nothing else, there's 5 points that I hope you take away. Number 1, AI, use it as your golden ticket. Use it to get you in the room. That's what everyone's talking about. That's what's sucking all of the air out of the room. That's the current focus. Use it to position your FinOps team. However, you have to do the work. You need to be able to bring the unit economics. You need to be able to bring the trade-offs. You need to be able to tell your C-suite, your leadership, what is your final recommendation? It's that clarity that's going to keep you in the room and keep a seat at the table just for you.
If you can't answer the question, you don't get to stay in the room. So we need to bring the decision clarity that earns that seat and maintains it.
So AI, I think it has a place. I think that it's going to eliminate the reporting, the dashboards, the very tactical aspects of FinOps. It's going to eliminate those, and your role is now going to be elevated to enable the strategic portion. Your focus is now changing. Your role and what you need to bring to the conversation needs to change. So don't fight AI. Leverage it to take care of those reporting, those meeting minutes, the variance explanation, while you focus on the harder questions.
Yeah. So and your role is changing, but your level of impact is as well, right? Your organizational relevance is changing also. So there's a very positive way of framing it. Yeah, let's continue.
So executives are looking to fund bets. They're not looking for optimizations. So think about the 5 capabilities that we discussed that will help elevate your FinOps team within the organization, bring you up to the next rung on the ladder, and use those, right? You need to speak the language of the business. You need to bridge that gap between the technical and the business jargon. You need to bring that unit economics, the trade-offs. You need to operate at speed. Think in daily cadences, weekly cadences. And finally, you own the narrative. Bring that decision. Bring the clarity to your executives, to your leadership that they're yearning for, really.
Yeah. And as Jessica says, right, they're gamblers. They're making bets. Sometimes they're betting their role, their job. Sometimes they're betting the business. Our job is to provide them with the information on how much money they need to put on the table, what they stand to win, and how likely their number is to come in, right? That's our role. It's their role to make the decision. Our role is to enable them with the best information possible to make that decision confidently and to show the reasoning behind it.
Think about the arc that we talked about, the methodology that you can apply within your own organization. Think about diagnosing the problem, stabilizing, proving, and then finally influencing that decision.
And this isn't a one-off, right, one example and done. It's a repeatable arc that you run across your entire portfolio, right? We looked at a winner, same arc, maybe it stops at step 2 with a loser, but we're still applying that same framework throughout.
And then lastly, the goal is to influence where money is spent, to influence decisions. So FinOps earns its seat by making AI and technology investment decisions possible.
All right, so here's where to go from here. Here are 5 things you can take away.
Yeah. So, Monday morning, you're back at your desk. The excitement of FinOps X is starting to kind of dwindle. And you're thinking, what do I do next? So here's what you should be focused on come Monday morning. So number 1, pick your atlas. Pick an application, any workload. Doesn't have to be AI. It can be, just one, and focus on that this coming week. Build a cost to serve. So even if it's rough, even if you're not sure it's right, think about building those unit economics. You want to get to that cost per feature or cost per transaction. Make sure that it relates and is in the language of your business.
Cost per unit of output. Cost per 1 million tokens is a start. That doesn't necessarily tell a business person what they need to know. They're like, tokens, what is a token? I think it's just us in this room that can probably articulate what that is. Executives probably cannot. Make sure it's something that resonates with them. Best case scenario, it's a revenue producing unit of output. In our case, it was cost per paid user.
Next, think about the questions that the C-suite are asking. And just pick one of those questions, any one of them. It can be the CFO, CEO, and think how you can answer it. And make it simple, right? You need to be able to bring that clarity and be concise in how you answer that question.
Yeah, simplest, healthy, not healthy, thumbs up, thumbs down. That's where I'd start. That's where we started here, right? Diagnose, is the math broken? Does the math hold? Easy place to start, provides immediate value, immediate strategic clarity on what needs to happen next.
Yeah. And then next, identify a governance gap. So think about the questions that Alex was trying to answer during the stabilized phase of Atlas. Are we scaling efficiently? Are we thinking about this at the right price point for the right feature? Think about one of those areas and answer the question, and think about how you can bring governance.
And make sure when you do, you're putting it in that cost-quality trade-off, especially if it's an AI application, right? We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and completely diminish an application's value because we've closed off all the features that it needs in order to work properly. So make sure that that governance gap is closed in conversation, in collaboration with the product team that owns, uses, understands the business context of that application. As Mike said in his keynote today, we need to be empathetic to the business owners. So make sure you stress that.
And then lastly, have that recommendation ready. You're going to be looked to provide what do we do next? Where do we go from here? So think about what your final recommendation would be and why. Be able to explain that and have the data to back it up. So when your leadership asks you, you can say, this is my recommendation, this is why, and they'll have the confidence to make the decision moving forward.
And that investment recommendation needs a few parts, right? How much money are you putting on the table? How much money do you stand to win? What's the level of risk associated with it? Bring that to your executives, provide the rationale behind it and the reasoning explaining it. Sometimes they'll say, no, I don't agree, and that can often be more revealing than an immediate yes, because it helps you frame it better the next time, right? Executives know things that we don't. They see things at a higher level of visibility that we don't always see. Our job is to provide them with the best information and the best knowledge that we have. So don't be discouraged if your investment recommendation isn't taken. The first one I threw out wasn't taken either.
So those are 5 moves, regardless of what tool you have or where you are in your journey. Those are 5 moves that you can make come Monday morning. So as we leave you today, what's the bottom line? What do we want you to remember? That FinOps, when we shape where money goes, it stops being a cost function, and it starts becoming this leadership capability.
Absolutely.
It starts becoming an enabler for the business.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. Thanks for watching. Check out the rest of our channel for more FinOps content. Like, subscribe, and leave questions and comments for our speakers. We appreciate your support.